Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. And today's topic, to continue our series on Buddhist philosophy, how to build an enlightened society. And I think this is perfect timing for this episode, for everything that's going on in the world and all around. So
all the good things.
Yes.
When we last left our hero, he was sitting underneath the Bodhi tree, trying to figure it all out. And
facing all his demons.
Yeah, and he definitely came up with some very interesting ideas, much needed today, like you said.
So we're continuing our series on Buddhism. Those of you who haven't listened to the previous episodes, we're not talking about Buddhism as a religion, but Buddhism as a philosophy. And we talked about the difference between religion and philosophy. And basically, it's a way of life, a way of thinking about the world, and looking at how we can apply that in our modern life. We don't necessarily have to go to a Buddhist center and become a Buddhist, and
unless you want.
Give up
Not that
meat
there's anything wrong with that.
and killing bugs. Worrying about all your lives, past lives. You can actually apply this no matter what faith you have, or if you don't have any faith at all, you just need a little guidance in your life.
Yeah, it is mostly a psychology, right? When we, or the way we approach it anyway, because Buddha is talking about how to work with the mind. What is going on in your mind? What is
going on in your
What is
mind?
the philosophy or the nature of reality, the way we experience it? Yeah, so in this episode, we wanted to talk about how can we apply it on a big scale. Like, are these ideas worthy of consideration when we're thinking about social structures, businesses, institutions, religions perhaps,
politics,
groups, organizations of all kinds. And so let's get into it. Let's start with this beautiful idea that comes through Buddhism, but it's much older. It goes back to the Vedas. It's called Indra's net. So Indra's net is a view of the cosmos that Buddha was very much aware of because he came up in that culture and at that time. And what Indra's net says is that if you can imagine a spider web that extends in all directions into infinity, and in the intersection of each thread, there's a little dewdrop, a crystal dewdrop that reflects all the other dewdrops in the net perfectly.
like a hologram.
Very much like a hologram. It says that is the cosmos that we're living in. That is the matrix that we move in. Every part of the universe, every single thing in the universe, every single point of awareness is reflecting all the other parts.
And Jung talks about this with the world is showing us our unknown faces, like parts of ourself, like we're seeing the world, people in the world as aspects of our own personality. The things we love, the things we don't love about ourselves are really shown up in other people. So that is similar to this concept, and I'm sure Jung read about Indra's net in his studies.
Absolutely. Actually, many philosophers in the West were influenced by Eastern thought as it was coming in the early 1900s. And back to Indra's net, though, if you think about what that means for us in society, each one of us is this point of awareness.
So we're a dewdrop crystal on that.
Yeah, because it would say that our mind is essentially reflecting everything in the universe. That's why Jung's idea of the collective unconscious makes sense, because the experiences that we're having, the symbols that arise in our dreams, are arising from a deeper level what he called the collective unconscious, we can think of that collective unconscious as Indra's net. That everything is interconnected, interwoven, and reflecting everything else in the universe.
And it's consciousness. Everything is that consciousness. And we are that consciousness.
Yes, yes. And Indra's net came up in Buddhism as a way of explaining this idea that Buddha came up with of dependent arising. So dependent arising was Buddha's idea of trying to find the cause of something. Because we live, if we go by our senses, it appears that something causes something else.
Cause and effect.
Cause and
Law
effect.
of karma.
Yeah.
Right?
So if we ask, somebody died, why did that person die? Well, we might say the illness killed him or her. But then if we dig deeper and we use this principle of Indra's net, we can say, well, wait a minute, that's not the ultimate cause, right? Because we can ask, well, where did the disease come from? And what caused him to get that disease? So you have all these extending tentacles going out in every direction as to what caused the death. And ultimately, like in just staying within the realm of somebody's life, you can say, well, the ultimate cause was his birth.
Yeah, he died because he was born.
Yes. But then you can also ask, well, what caused the birth? Parents caused the birth. And what caused the birth of parents, and so forth and so on. There you start to see that there's nothing that is independently arising. Everything is interconnected in this web of beingness. That I think Buddha was trying to emphasize that if you go by the assumption that there is a cause and effect, like a direct, that is a definite cause of something else, you're in a delusional state, pretty much.
Yeah.
You're in error already. And that you can never really find the truth that way, because you're assuming somebody hurt me, somebody did something wrong to me, and blaming that person. And that is error right there. That's the cause of a lot of human suffering, is that we ascribe causality to others.
You know, I was telling you last week, we always have these deep conversations amongst ourselves. We always say we should just record them and put them on a podcast. But I was talking about when I was a hypnotherapist, and one of the things they taught us in the school was to look for the ISE, the initial sensitizing event, which is, and then I would do regressions on people, and they would regress back, and it was when they were 5, and this happened, but then we started, as I started exploring more, I realized that you really can't find that cause, because when I looked at my life, I could say, oh, I had this issue with men because of my father, but then is it my father the cause of the way he disciplined me? No, because he had parents that taught him how to discipline, and they had parents who were there, and you can go back to the beginning of time and really try to trace back where is the initial event, and we can't. People try to go into past lives and find the reason why their life is, but where you're really just kind of getting lost in the story and trying to find blame versus looking for what is happening in this moment and how can I be free, versus let me find the cause so I can go back in the past and undo it in some way or fix it in some way. And I spent so much time doing that, and what I realized is that the regressions really weren't effective as much as working with the client in that moment and what's arising in their mind right now, and where's their mind stuck in their misperception. And that was what freed people. So this Indra's net makes great sense, because you could be chasing yourself and the cause of everything. And I always felt too, when I would go to these workshops, that every time I would dig up something new, a new connection, and then this is connected to this, and you kind of get lost in it, and you get lost in the web, basically, of your past, and you're never really living. You think, if I could connect everything and make everything make sense, then I can move on. but there's a freedom almost in knowing that I mean, it's scary to think about that there is no initial cause, because we want to find that thing that we can hang on to.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is psychologically, that we need that kind of confirmation that, oh, now I know this parent was terrible to me and that's why I'm the way I am? And
yes, that causality, or kind of that simplistic causality model, it works on an evolutionary principle, because we learn from the environment. So if I learn that if I eat this kind of fruit, it makes me sick, then I learn that caused my illness, therefore I should avoid it. So it's a very practical way of being in the world. You don't have to really think about anything. You just kind of go by that immediacy of things. But it doesn't work when you consider the larger cosmic play of things. And that's what Buddha was getting at.
Even that fruit didn't make you sick. You're sick because you have a body.
That's right.
I have a body that is human that doesn't know how to digest it. That's the cause, not the actual fruit that you ate.
That's right.
And then why do you have a body, and evolution? And
yes, on and on.
Yeah, so we're chasing some blind source of like one place that we can find. And
so it sounds very mystical in essence to talk about Indra's death, but it's the most practical, because otherwise you're in error. No matter how logical you are and how smart you are, if you're going on the assumption that there is a direct cause to things, you're misreading the whole thing. You're going by that instinctual survival nature that nature itself set up for us to survive, but it wasn't intended for us to understand the workings of the mind and the workings of the universe. So that's what Buddha was getting at. You have to clarify your mind of conditioning so that you can get at the truth, so that you can see the true dharma of things, the true way things work.
So the scientists that are looking for the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, that cause, they're actually in error as well, in a sense.
In a way.
They're trying to find that materialistic practicality to how this universe was created, and they're looking at the material and measuring energy versus understanding it from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah, I mean, science is a whole other thing, because it was never really designed to replace our cosmic view of things. It's simply an instrument.
Yeah.
But what happened is it became a scientism, meaning people started using it as a religion, as a replacement for this larger cosmic view of things. So they reduced everything to material. And materialism is a tragedy, because then everything is reduced to what is its value, what is its monetary and functional value. When you reduce life to that, you're asking for trouble, because you're going to wreck the planet in just simply doing your work, because you're operating from that assumption that nothing else matters except something's value. So trees are seen as lumber for building houses, instead of, oh, there's this incredible living thing that operates on DNA very much like we do, and has been around for thousands of years, and it gives life to the planet, but
and us.
Nobody sees that because they're operating on that materialistic philosophy. And we know from psychology, the assumptions that we make of the world and its nature create our reality. So Buddhist ideas are useful in this regard, that they can help us understand a deeper pattern of things, a deeper understanding of what is really going on in the cosmos.
Can I ask you a question? What about, I know Jung talked about this idea that we see the world that we believe is there. And so basically we're all looking through our own personal lens in this cosmo, in this hologram, and we have our ego has its own perception of what the world is. And how does that fit into Indra's net and that kind of idea?
Yeah.
That it's not this net that's out there that we're kind of participating in. It's that we actually contribute to the net as we have our ideas of what we're seeing, and then what we believe is there we experience. So if we experience something as dark and negative, it will appear dark and negative. For example, he said, and I read this in The Secret of the Golden Flower, because he talks about Eastern philosophy and Jungian psychology, and he said gravity is there because we believe in it, not because it's actually real. And that totally blew my mind. We all have agreed on some level that there's gravity, so it's part of our experience. So something that everyone agrees is absolute, like we can't change gravity. So how much of our life are we making assumptions on what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, and what life is that's creating our reality in our own way?
Yeah, I think Jung and Buddha would probably say that we experience what we believe is possible. Therefore, it always goes back to working with our mind. Mm-hmm. Both Jung and Buddha were emphasizing you have to understand what is your mind. Otherwise, you're in error. You have to be able to work with your mind to direct it, because otherwise the conditioning that the mind accumulates as you experience the world will determine how you see the world.
So do we think things are externally, as they would say, independently arising apart from ourselves?
Yes.
And they're just floating objects out there, and we're not an active participant, but everything that comes to us and arises, we can find it within ourselves. It's a part of ourselves mostly that we can't see.
Very much so. So in Jungian psychology, you see this emphasis on integration, meaning that yes, you're experiencing things as separate from you, as other people, as other situations and events external to you, and the objective of growth, of individuation, is to begin to see them as part of yourself, emanations of your own psyche, aspects of your own psyche, so that you can integrate them, so that they become part of you, and you're expanding your awareness gradually.
And so enlightenment, for an enlightened society, we have not only our personal beliefs, but then we culturally and in society and the groups that we fall into have a certain belief, and then we kind of resonate with them, and then we see things as the group sees it. They call it groupthink. Yeah, was that Jung's term, groupthink? Or
not sure.
Okay. And then so we start to blindly follow our tribe, our mini tribe, and we kind of see things from only a certain perspective. And the more we allow ourselves to be moved by the group, the less power we have, the less independence we have. And so in society, there's a lot of division. There's especially in different countries right now, everyone has their own opinions of COVID and the wars and all this stuff, and everyone's fighting amongst themselves and in their groups and projecting onto each other and seeing the other person as the cause of their problems without understanding that they're seeing their own shadow, their unknown self that they judge projected onto the other people. And so to have a more enlightened society is to understand what is really going on, and understanding that our mind has this kind of filter that it puts on reality and makes us see things that aren't true or absolute.
Yeah, so in Buddhist philosophy, this idea of dependent arising was considered the key element to understanding all the other principles that he was talking about. So it's a really important one. It holds the key to understanding Buddhist philosophy. So if we ask, why would that be? Why does understanding this principle kind of give you an understanding of compassion, for example? Well, here's an example. if you're trying to be compassionate towards other people, but you're reading it as they are outside of me and I'm disconnected from them, right? They are independent. In other words, they're independently arising in the universe, independent of me. If I close my eyes or if I go away, it's over, and
they're off doing their own thing.
Yeah, they're out there.
And it's not my fault what they're doing.
Yeah.
And
so Buddhist philosophy says that's a misperception. That's not the way it works. What is happening is that you are experiencing this world, this universe, including other people, as part of this Indra's net, as part of this cosmic interconnectedness.
And until we know we're interconnected, how could we love each other? If we're not, and have compassion for each other, if we feel like everything's separate, like they're the bad ones, I'm good.
Yes, but there's a deeper implication here. It says that, okay, if I see people as independently acting, then I can blame them. Then I can say, he hurt me, he robbed me, he cheated me. And Buddha says in one of his sutras, he says, if you hold on to that idea, you're forever caught in resentment. All you can do is forgive or forget, but you're caught in that misperception of things, that things are independently arising, and therefore people are to blame.
Well, wouldn't you say that forgiveness then is not really...
Not in the Buddhist sense.
Yeah, because you're forgiving, you're actually saying that that person did something wrong, but I forgive you. I'm the bigger person.
That's
I'm
right.
going to forgive you, which is, might be a good step in the beginning, but the truth of what's really happening is that
Yes.
person, in essence, didn't harm you the way you think. And you had an experience, but the nature of that experience isn't what you think it is.
That's it. Because if we apply this principle of interdependent arising, then we see that the cause of my suffering from that person, they are not the cause. The cause is infinitely spread out in this web of beingness, and I cannot blame that person.
Because their parents might have conditioned them to be a certain way. Their parents were maybe experienced something that culminated in that person behaving in that way.
That's right. And that's true compassion, that you're dropping the blame, you're freeing yourself, your mind, from that attachment to blaming this other person, projecting, as Jung would say, your shadow onto them, right? And it makes more sense because that's really the way things exist. Nothing is an island. Nothing exists independently. Even biologically, we know that to be true. Nothing exists independently. Your genes have come from way back for the first human beings, and even before that, animal life.
So how much conditioning have we absorbed?
Yeah.
It's what I find too is interesting is that when someone is causing a problem in your life and they have a certain they act a certain way, and you like triggered by them, their behavior. A great question is how am I like them? And it may not be a direct connection, but I usually find that that the person that person who's creating the trigger, the person who's perceiving it, has that same quality, but they don't accept that about themselves, and they judge themselves for having that. Myself included, judging yourself for being to this or to that or too aggressive, and then we're really just kind of seeing that person play out our own stuff, and then we're judging them because it's so harmful to like have that toward ourselves. It's like almost like a way the ego tries to protect us by saying, yeah, they're bad, let's not make us bad. And but I think the key is when you have compassion for someone else, you're actually working on yourself. You're actually working on that aspect of yourself that may be triggered or maybe conditioned or maybe not be perfect human being, and that is really how we grow. That's how we become whole again and connect. Is we reclaim that projection and see that what we're really seeing is that net. We're seeing that whole, and the cause is the ego. The cause is that we believe we're this ego, and all that conditioning that dilutes what is true about ourselves and about others.
Yeah, that conditionality then, and you see here dependent arising accounts for karma, accounts for this idea that Buddha brought about of wakefulness. That if you understand this principle, you're awakening your mind to its true nature, and you're seeing reality as it truly is, instead of your own projections, your own limited assumptions. And he says, this Dharma, this understanding, this teaching is the key to the ultimate Dharma. Meaning, if you understand this, you're understanding what I'm trying to teach, which is, how do we transcend suffering? Right? It always goes back to this very practical goal that he had. How can we help human beings transcend their suffering instead of being caught up in it and continuously creating more for themselves?
And so one of the ways we do that is compassion. And then another thing is equanimity, the ego wants to judge everything as good or bad, as a pleasant or unpleasant. That's just how we've been conditioned. And so equanimity is a beautiful practice, Buddhist practice. They talk about it. It's a way to free us from that conditioning, from our karma, basically. And the cause is the ego putting the judgment on. So we want to take the judgment away. And I think a lot of people have trouble with the equanimity, because you're like, how can you say morally that murder's not bad or good, or that, being, hurting someone else is not bad or good, or anger is not bad or good? How can you see that in equanimity? And there was a great story of the Buddha. He says that, it's killing someone is bad, but if he was on a ship and the captain was kind of crazy and wanted to drown 100 people, if he killed the captain and saved 100 people, is that good or bad? So it's like everything has its kind of gray area, and if we start to stop being so rigid, we start to see life being a little more open with possibility. Every time we judge something, it's like it collapses into that fixed idea of what we learned from the past, and we're in that net, just experiencing our past. We're not experiencing possibility. And so there's a great story I read, I think it's a Buddhist story, where the guy was a farmer, and he was in this little village, and he had a son, was born, and everyone was in the village was like, oh, you're so lucky, you have a son, he can help you in the fields, he can, he's going to be a strong man, and he's healthy. And the farmer said, it could be good, it could be bad. And so later on, the son grows up, and he's doing the work in the fields, and he lets the gate open, leaves it open at night. All the horses run away. And they were like, oh, such bad luck, you lost all of your horses, that's such valuable property, and now you're destitute without horses, how are you going to farm? And he said, it could be good, could be bad. Well, the horses that went away actually brought back even more horses. There were wild horses into the corral, and brought them back. And so now he had twice as many horses. So everyone in the village was like, could be good. This is great. And he said, nope, could be good, could be bad. And then it keeps going on where the son tries to break one of the wild horses and breaks his leg. And they're like, terrible, this is terrible. And then it goes on where the farmer kept saying, it's not good or bad, it's not good or bad. And then the army came because there was a war coming, and they were looking for able young men to fight the war, and the son couldn't go because he had a broken leg. And he's like, well, could be good, could be bad. Like, you're so lucky your son didn't have to go and die in the war. And so the life goes on that way, that we don't know in that moment if it is good or bad. Because you haven't lived your full life out yet. And sometimes you have to look back and see, all the ebbs and flows of life. And when we look at everything, it's gray. It really is. There's nothing all good and there's nothing all bad. Just like every person, there's nothing all bad about someone or all good about someone. We have to accept the dark and light in everything in life. And I think that's really what the equanimity is that if you try to build your life on just being good, pushing away all the bad, it's like you'll never be complete and never be happy. And then also having that idea that you have to be perfect is such pressure on yourself to push away the things that are unpleasant about yourself and that you have to hide. And that's the whole reason why we have a shadow and why we have an ego. And it's just a trap. So by using equanimity, that it's not right or wrong. Let me see its true nature. It's in Indra's net. It's an apparent reality. It's the dance of life. We can start to see maybe the truth of what it really is.
Absolutely.
And the connectedness that we have.
Yeah. I like what you said about morality, because that's precisely what the Buddha was trying to get at also, is that you cannot legislate morality. Or you can, but it only works to a certain extent. What you want to do, let's say using Buddhist philosophy as a blueprint for building society, what we would need to do is to teach people this deeper understanding of what is the nature of reality, so that people can understand what is really happening, instead of attributing false causes to things and believing that other people are hurting them or trying to work against them. Understanding this deeper principle of interconnectedness. That would then help people be moral from within them, from within themselves, that they would understand what is proper to do here, instead of blaming other people, kind of taking responsibility and creating the kind of situations that they know need to be played out in society.
Well, here's, I think, what you're trying to say, and maybe I could say it in a kind of break it down a little bit, is that morality should be a choice, not social pressure. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people, the social pressure creates this, oh, I can't do this, or religion creates, you can't do this and you can't do that. You can't have sex before you're married. You have to marry a man or a woman, and there's all these rules. And but it's like, are you choosing it because someone else told you that that's what's good or bad, or are you choosing it because, like you said, within yourself, I'm deciding that this is how I want to live? And there's something beautiful about making it a choice versus doing it because you think it's the right thing to do and what society expects, and it'll make you look good in society.
Yeah. Yes, and of course it's a very different way of being, and we would not recommend it, let's say, trying that without having taught people this deeper Dharma, this understanding. In other words, they have to be awake. To create an enlightened society, the individuals in that society must be awake.
Yeah.
So I can understand people would object and say, when are you going to wake up everyone? I mean, it's an impossibility almost.
It's like a bullhorn, like, let's wake up everyone.
But we know there's these principles in nature that you get to a tipping point, to about 10%. And if we can wake up about 10% of the planet, there will be a transformation. Just like when you learn something new, you don't have to understand everything about it thoroughly and completely. There seems to be like a tipping point where you get it intuitively, instinctually.
You can't put it in words, and I think that's the hardest thing, is that you can't put enlightenment, what it means to be awake, in words. Because it's ineffable. You can't really describe it.
And that's precisely what the Buddha was trying to do. He said there must be a way for us to understand this deeper principle of wakefulness, of really being enlightened. And I think we've evolved enough as human beings to where we're at a point where we can enlighten ourselves. Like the Buddha said at the end of his life, he said, be a lamp unto each other. In other words, enlighten each other.
Light each other up versus trying to tear each other down.
Yeah. And the only way we can do that is through this introspective approach to understanding our mind, understanding the nature of what it is that we're experiencing. And we have science now that can help us. It can support our assumptions about things. Indra's net, for example, it seems to go along with physics now.
Yeah,
physics supports this idea that everything is interconnected and that things are arising in this one principle. Now, science hesitates in naming it, but what they're talking about is consciousness. Everything arises in consciousness.
And so it's like the light that we have to light up within ourselves first. And a lot of times we think we're enlightened, no one else is. It's like the people out there that you're judging aren't enlightened are parts of yourself that aren't enlightened. Yeah. That they're parts of myself that I haven't loved and had compassion for yet. And that's what enlightenment is. Isn't like changing, like I said with the bullhorn, trying to move the masses to follow you in a herd. But it's more about you doing the work within yourself of saying, what am I judging about that person? Why am I making that person wrong? How can I have more equanimity? What does this say about me? What is that reflection in me? And you work within yourself, and then the world seems to rearrange. Like first, on a small scale, the people around you start to change. The people, I know for me, just changing my perspective of my father changed our relationship. Because I had this fixed idea of who he was, and then I realized where my mistake was, my misperception was, and thank God it happened before he passed. I got to have a great relationship with him before he died. But how many people in our life that we pushed away or we discounted because they caused us problems? That maybe if we just figured out what was that pointing back to you, and that's the hardest thing, I think. People don't want to make it about them. It's not me. I'm perfect. I'm good. It's that person. It's the hardest thing to do, is to look within, is to be self-reflective. I mean, it's nice to look at all our positive qualities, but it's hard to look at the things that we find unpleasant about ourselves.
Absolutely. And so this idea of dependent arising is at the heart of it all, because it gives us the rationale, the deeper understanding of why compassion works and how it can really work. But it has to do with dropping the false assumption. He hurt me, he robbed me, he cheated me. Buddha says, if you hold on to that, you'll always be caught up in anger, in resentment. If you let go of that, then you're seeing the true reality.
Well, you see your own potential, because when you're hanging on to the past, you can't, it's always going to be there and influencing your life. You're going to always say, this thing that I had to deal with, this is why I'm the way I am, and this is why I need, like you're kind of carrying this like heavy, sack around with you, of past stuff that's weighing you down. And again, we're not discounting the experience. The experience may have been not pleasant, but do you want to keep carrying that experience with you every day of your life, or do you want to say, I want to be free of it? And you're not going to be free by making the other person wrong. You're going to be free of saying, how can I look at the world in a different way? How can I look at myself in a different way? How can I see that at the core of me, my true self has never been damaged, has never been hurt, has never been harmed, and that what I'm seeing is Indra's net and this kind of hologram of life, and the Maya, as the Vedanta people call it, or samsara in Buddhism, this kind of misperception of the world that we're seeing, and we're stuck in that, and we're not really free. We're kind of chasing ourselves all the time. Our old self is chasing us all the time, we're trying to fix it.
Yes, and in that regard, then you see Buddha's one-pointed mind. He's trying to solve the riddle of suffering. If you hold on to this false idea of independent arising, meaning that things are separate and independent of your mind, you're always caught up in that suffering. You're carrying that bundle, like you said, of grief and resentment and past experiences, and believing that that is your reality. And when you believe something that strongly, it becomes your reality. So you're recreating it over and over. You're creating your suffering every day. You're bringing that suffering into everyday experiences.
I notice for me that if I have an agitation in my life or something that, and I'm like, I just don't want to be that way anymore, like a little irritated on certain things, the outer world people will come up and kind of reflect back what's really happening. What is the source of this agitation, or this, not the true source, but what is that agitation? Where is it coming from? And what's maybe the nature of it? And then in dreams, and you start to see the picture and the connections and other people and other events in your life, instead of feeling like a victim, like that person hurt me, this happened, that happened. And it's like I'm trying to like whack-a-mole my worlds. You say, oh, it's reflecting, my consciousness is saying, here's where your misperception is. Here's where your misperception is. And until you pay attention, it just seems as though the world is causing problems. And then I find that this work is so powerful to take responsibility for what is this showing me about my mind. And then you're free, and then you're grateful for all the people that you were agitated about, and you say, oh my God, this person was just giving me the greatest gift in the world. They were showing me something I couldn't see, because it's really hard to look within yourself, and that's where these other people that cause problems really show us, is the parts of ourselves we can't see. And then to have compassion, look at it with equanimity, and then we're actually working on ourselves through other people. So. Yeah, it's very powerful, and if we just really look, we could see the patterns, and we're free. Like we see that it's almost like that that story where Beatrice left the trail of the thread for who was the one who came out of the maze? Remember that thread that he was going to fight the Minotaur and came out? I forgot who the god was. Oh, Dante, right? And Dante came out, and he had that thread to lead him to freedom. And so the beautiful thing about this web is that all the connections are there, and you could start to see them yourself. You start to see the matrix, as you said earlier, and then we find ourselves back in freedom, and seeing that everyone is reflecting back, and that we have control over our life. We're not this ping pong in the world bouncing around. We're actually seeing ourselves. And that's really, if we could do that, imagine how society would change. We would stop projecting so much out there.
Yeah, when you really consider the things that we as human beings have come up with, let's say the Buddhas, Zen, Christianity, Rumi and his philosophies of beauty and music and poetry. We have all this knowledge. We have enough knowledge to be able to create a peaceful, enlightened society. All we have to do is put it into practice. That's all.
It's already been here.
Yeah, it's always been around, and they're all teaching. All these philosophies are teaching us that the wisdom is within us. In other words, our true mind is already peaceful. It's already loving. It's already abundant. It's harmonious. What creates the confusion and the misalignment with nature is the ego. It's the false persona, the roles that we play in society, as Jung would say, the masks that we wear. That's what creates our misalignment with each other.
Well, wouldn't you say too that on the root of everything, everyone is us? So there really is no other. Like we're really just having like all these relationships, all these people are really us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That oneness.
Yeah, the deeper mystical reality is that, because if you go back to Indra's net, every little dewdrop is reflecting every other drop in the universe into infinitum. Now, if you look at the reflection of each little drop within the drop, it's reflecting everything else. So inwardly it goes into infinity as well. Inward, outward infinity. And it means that your awareness is that infinity. It's that cosmic reality. And so we are the source of the universe in that regards. But we leave that to...
It's kind of a bigger picture. It's hard to see that person is me. Like, you think about the worst person in the world that you would never want to be like, and that is part of you. That is, like, I think the most resistance people feel. But we start with maybe just people that are in our family that we love but irritate us, and we could start there. We don't have to start with the worst person in the world that we think. We could start with just people that mildly irritate us and start practicing that. And then you'll start to see even the worst person in the world you can find compassion for.
Yeah.
And that's mastery, basically. It's not something that you do right off the bat or judge yourself if you can't, or if you're angry or you have all those feelings. The best thing is to have compassion for your own conditioning too, that you're responding to those people based on your conditioning. So to have compassion for yourself when you do that.
That is the ultimate lesson of Buddhist philosophy. He's saying, if you want to save the world, if you want to create that enlightened society, you start with yourself. There is no way for you to go out there and create peace. You'll just create more confusion, more suffering. You have to start with yourself. You have to go inward. You have to meditate. You have to find that wholeness within you. Then you're contributing to the creation of that enlightened society. That is the hardest lesson for us to learn. Again, because we're operating on another paradigm.
Consciousness.
The current society is operating on the materialistic paradigm that says everything is out there, independent, floating around, let's say separate from me, outside of my awareness. And Buddha is saying, no, it's the other way around. But you have to realize it first in order for you to change it. So if we want to create that enlightened society, we have to start within, looking at our own mind and creating, like you said, that equanimity, practicing that real compassion, that letting go of resentments.
Loving everyone. And it's like we always say, it's so easy to love people that love us and adore us. And it's really challenging to love people that give us problems. But that's the people that need our love the most, for ourselves, because that's really, they're reflective of the parts of ourselves that we don't love. And we don't see it because it's unconscious. So we're like, I'm not like them. I'm not selfish. I'm not greedy. But it's a part of you that you're rejecting. And so by loving other people, understanding, conditioning, why they act the way they do, and not knowing the cause they're not the cause of our suffering, that it's our mind that's creating the suffering, that's when we can be free.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So there's a question that says, is there a possibility of listening to this again? Yes, it's going to be on YouTube here. And then we attract them through matching frequencies. Well, that would be a materialistic view of consciousness, which means that everyone's separate. But we're not attracting people into our life. We're actually seeing ourselves. And I think that's the hardest thing, because the ego sees things as separate. And the truth is that we're all one, and we're just kind of extensions, almost like a fractal, right? That we reflect of each other. And true mastery is really seeing that person is not matching, like energetically coming into our life because we're connected, is because they are us. And I think that's such a hard thing to see, especially with difficult people. And then we also think with love too, when we fall in love with someone, we think, ooh, we're on the same vibe, we're vibing with each other, they're our soulmate. But really we're seeing our own divine in the other person when we love someone. And And then, of course, we end up seeing the things that irritate us about ourselves and the other person. And then I think that would help relationships as well. Everyone's looking for that true love, and the love is within you first, and then it'll show up out there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a world is a reflection of what's inside, always. Outer is just a reflection. And it's the hardest thing to grasp in our life. Yes, this is I love this talk today. It was great. Thank you, Rob. IndrasNet.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Oh, can you elaborate on how do you see ourselves in a day in a murderer who's killed an innocent person due to hate?
Yeah. Yeah, we'd go back to that idea of what is the cause of that? If you attribute the cause to that individual, that's a mistaken perception. Of course, that person acted out and performed that action, but the cause of it is extended in the web into infinity, basically. Where will you find the original cause that ultimately ended up creating that violent act? You cannot find it. Therefore, to attribute the cause to that particular individual is a mistake. It's an error. It's a misperception. Now, Buddha is not saying, well, there's nothing we can do.
And let that happen, and that's okay.
Right. He would say, enlighten yourself so that you can teach others, and eventually that ripple effect will reach that person.
Yeah, so I would look at, and we always say this to our students, is that what is that pull from you when you witness something like that? What's the judgment that what is it response within you when you witness something like that? And you go inside and figure out, well, what is this that my witnessing that causes my suffering or creates a fear? And then you're going inside, and that's why you're seeing that experience. Not that you caused the experience, but why your mind is focused on that, and how can I enlighten myself through that?
Yes, and Buddha would also say that once you understand the true nature of that experience, then you can act appropriately. That's where he comes up with all those right views and right actions and right attitudes, because then once you understand this principle of interconnectedness, then you can act appropriately, meaning you can really help that individual and perhaps the family of the murdered victim and so forth.
And even the family of the murderer. There's a great documentary on the mother of Klebold, who was in the Columbine. I lived in Colorado when that happened. And the mother of the son who actually did the murder, she had to deal with, this was my beautiful baby that I brought into the world that did this terrible thing. So it's like the murderer suffering, the innocent person suffering. Like, no one gets out of here without suffering. So the cause of that experience or that dynamic of someone murdering an innocent person is the cause is suffering. The cause is a misperception. Because if that murderer knew, he wasn't ignorant of his own nature, he wouldn't do that. And so we have to say, well, where am I ignorant of my own nature? And then you start to see that it's not you're a murderer, but you can be like someone who's ignorant of their own nature. And that's the key. So it's much deeper. But yeah, we always get that question like, well, what about this extreme and Hitler and, all these dark things that happen? And we have to break it down again and say, well, what is really going on? What is, on face value, it looks like this terrible, terrible thing. And then the cause is that one person, but what is the true cause? And it's that we think we're the ego, and that is the cause of suffering, as we said last time. So next week, we'll have one more episode, but we will be in our new location. Finally, our move will be complete. And so we'll have a new set and better lighting and more great topics on the Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and thanks for the great comments and questions.
Yes, thanks for coming and asking those great questions, and we'll see you next week.
Stay well.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.